And we're officially live. I love your job title, Tester. That's very descriptive.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Right?
You test the world's software.
Yeah, work in progress. Yeah.
Work in progress.
That's the goal.
That's the work in progress we're actually talking about today, right? So it's, this is going to be I'm going to say a very interesting geek out, right? Because literally everything that we're going to be talking about, we've literally done in the last couple of hours, I think, as far as getting builds working and, just general stuff. And so, I'm trying to think now. It's probably if MCP was November 2024, we were in Star West when just before it started to get the vibe testing explosion. So it must have been September, October 2024. And we were sat geeking out, drinking coffee in the morning, and you kind of spun your laptop on a build that you just finished for Testers.AI and kind of said, there it is, there's vibe testing, right? I'm going to update the code. I'm going to generate the code. I'm going to test the code. I'm going to fix the code, right? And that's, say, 2 years ago. And, I think we've seen the explosion since of maybe the fallout of vibe coding and vibe development, right? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but we've also seen tools like Lovable, Bolt, and many others that have just exploded in the valley, right? Where they've got investment, they've kind of I'm going to say just made it mainstream vibe coding. So you can literally go onto a website, type in, create me a website with hats. We're wearing hats today. And then it will hook in Shopify. And by the end of the 20 minutes of vibe coding, you published your website on GoDaddy, you're taking orders and you're shipping products, right? And I think that to me is terrifying. And it was kind of last time I think we were, I don't know if it was the last time we saw each other, but in Seattle when we were doing AICon. And, the same week that the Microsoft CEO had gone on stage and, tried to use agents to just fix the code, production issue. And he did that live on stage in literally where the other location Microsoft do their conferences in Seattle, right? So, I decided today, Pepsi challenge, you can't just talk about this. You've got to show people how it's doing. So I've kind of just recorded a 30-minute demo. We're going to kind of talk over the top. And I've created this app called livestream.test.lovable.app. It's there. It's a real thing. It's working. And I'm going to show you it being created, tested, and fixed using the tools that you pretty much built in the last week, 2 weeks, right? So do you want to kind of give a bit of an idea of why you started this Lovable journey? And I'm going to put the code on there for people to join as well if they want to join on and ask any question.
Yeah. So why did I think about working on Lovable? These vibe coding apps, they're not just like super interesting. Like, actually, the main reason is I'm a tester and I worry about software quality, and the world's talking about AI slop all the time now, and it kind of makes me sad. As a focused on caring about quality, and what's crazy is you've got these, like, I think Lovable, I don't know, it's like tens of thousands of new people are enabled to build apps now, right? Not just with prompts, but like you can just tell a web page, go build me an app that does my little business idea or some community kind of app or something like you're saying. And the problem is that the AI that generates something that looks kind of okay, right? And it's getting better every day, but they're full of bugs, like bugs that you and I would not have traditionally been okay shipping, right? But the problem is that all these people, they're not coders. They're not working not working at Google, not working at Microsoft. They don't have, a dedicated team of testers. And so I worry about the quality of those apps and those people's experiences with the software. So the thought was like, hey, like, and in long term, what's really should be happening, these people need testing. They need testing help, right? And how do you do it? You can't do it with human labor. You can't do it with, they don't have the budget. They're paying $25 a month for Lovable. Like, are they not going to hire a tester? So how do you make this stuff better? So the idea is, we've always been kind of this direction of encoding creating, AI agents that are versions of human testers that can do a lot of what human testers can do. So the idea is just put that into the platform so that with one click, you get basic testing at scale for everyone that builds on Lovable, Replit, Vercels, V0, you name it. So that was, I thought it was a big demand, big need, big problem in the world. They're not taking care of the problem, frankly, today. The platforms aren't, and they're making $1 billion by just generating the code. Someone needs to help test it. So that's where kind of the origin of all this stuff is. But I realized this one thing, and we can do the demo. What I've always wanted to do here, and we finally figured out to do it with Lovable, is to connect everyone talks about human in the loop, but like what you'll see here in a second is the AI testing agent. So the AI coding agents go build something. AI testing agents can, even without a human clicking, but can automatically look at what's being built, do some testing, find some bugs, send them back to the AI, and the AI can fix them. And then guess what the testing agent does? Looks at it, we've all been testers forever, looks at it and goes, oh, are there any regressions? And they verify the new functionality was added. And then they look for more bugs. So that virtuous loop of dev and test handoff can happen between the agents. Can't test everything, but the fact of the matter is that all these vibing platforms are just generating buggy code like by the billions of lines every day. So any basic help would be useful and kind of democratize quality overall. The world needs help with testing, and we can't test it all.
And we can't be there in person, can we? And I know we've already got a few people on the live stream. One that was actually with us in Seattle. I'm sure you might have remembered Jason, the Chris Carpenter, who used to actually was part of the Vivid board with me many years ago, probably 20 years ago when Vivid started. And then, we were in Seattle for AIConf last year, and, he was there, flying the flag, talking about this AI and stuff. So hopefully he'll enjoy it. And then, of course, the guys from who are also there. We've been to a number of different events last year, so so we'll get onto the demo, and then we'll probably answer a few questions. And if people do have them, they can literally just go to Slido and then put the code Lovable in there, and we'll pick up those questions as we go. Or they can just ask on the chat, which is where they're chatting at the moment. So let's do this, right? So. And you can tell because in the bottom right-hand corner, it does actually have the legitimate date on it, which is today, the 13th. I didn't set my timer forwards, even though I wish I could sometimes. And so, I started this demo. I thought, okay, let me just create an app, right? So you sent me this, I think it was probably last week, right? We had this conversation and we kind of said, well, this vibing, and like you said, they're paying $50 for a Lovable license. Are they really going to pay for a tester? Are they going to pay for somebody like Chris's team to do it? Probably not, right? They just want something that allows them to enable them to actually test quickly. And so, if you, and I obviously thank you earlier, Jason, at 6 a.m. this morning when you updated all of the extensions which are now available in the Chrome style. So as you can see, you can just type the word Testers.AI in there, and there's the Bolt New and the Vercel and all the other plugins, right? And they're all working, right? So they're all ready to go and ready to be used today. If you want to follow along and actually feel brave enough to jump onto Lovable or Bolt or whatever, and all I typed in, as you can see, is create a new website similar to Testers.AI. And just because I have the attention of span of a fish, some of this has been fast forwarded because as exciting as vibe coding is, and it does it very quickly, I don't think we all want to wait 6 minutes to watch it generate something. But it is going to go through and actually design and build a website that's very similar. And I've actually pasted the Lovable app into the chat so people can actually go onto that website, which was built. And in essence, you just created a very similar website. And so, to me, that's kind of half the battle. So the great thing about this Lovable app was you could literally just click on the Lovable app in the top right-hand corner on your browser, which means you've not had to load anything on. You could literally just load the extension, which I just showed, which is on the marketplace. And then you can literally click, test my app, right? So it can start looking and testing. And I think, when we talked about this, and I think that was the reason we started talking about this 2 weeks ago, was they, Lovable and Bolt had started offering their own testing inside, right? And it was, I'm not going to say embarrassing, but they literally, all they did was, open the page and clicked on 3 things. And it felt like kind of what we would have seen from Selenium maybe 10, 20 years ago. Wasn't anything that's like really exciting. So what I've done is I've typed in to publish the app, livestream test.lovable.app. I've got it to publish it, publish a repo, and then it's live, right? So everyone can go on it and start doing it. And once it's live, obviously any tool can test it. So I know Testers.AI has always been able to test websites from, probably 2-3 years ago when you started. But the real difference with the Lovable plugin is you can do it straight inside of your app. So then when you start checking for issues, you can actually get it to send. Now, I'm going to let this run, but what I know, Jason, you did as a new feature, literally like a couple of days ago, whatever, you kind of said, oh, well, I can just get it to automatically send in the chat box on the left-hand side every 30 seconds. The next one, right? So you can literally say, oh, here's the 25. Now just go and talk to the agent and just get it over. Talk to the Vibe coding engine and just run it. So I haven't done autofix because I wasn't feeling that brave. I was feeling semi-brave when I did it, right? But you'll see here that we're literally just pressing the check for general issues, and then we're just going to send those to the left-hand side, and then Lovable's going to fix them, right? And you did some research. I think was it September when you were looking at kind of clusters of types of issues that were coming out between Bolt and Lovable, right? You did a quite interesting.
It was in November, I think. Yep, November 14th. Everybody knows that day. It'll live in infamy. But yeah, we did some bulk testing of a bunch of apps generated by they're on the galleries. These are the ones that they're proud of, right? That Lovable and Bolt have put in their galleries that to show off what people have built. We went through and tested a bunch of them and looked for the patterns and the types of issues that they have, and then we actually designed these bots to look for those types of issues. So it's not just that they don't just look for bugs in general. They look specifically also for the types of issues that Gen AI produces when it generates code.
And that was interesting because actually, as I scrolled down, you probably saw there was you can toddle on the different personas, right? And one of them is Gen AI type tests, so generated, code. And we've seen this, right? We've seen the stuff that's kind of these systems have generated, and you can kind of see certain things that it doesn't do. And I call them AI engineering patterns, but the blueprints that it kind of just is, if I'm going to build a React app, here we go. And so you can see here, we're already sending it things like CTA, apparently the get started buttons are all different. You need to differentiate them. You have to change the placement. And, the Vibe tool's just going to spend all day in this, I'm going to say, the infinite Vibe loop, right? It could just go around fixing, rescan, fix the next set. I think it's going to get to the point where I think what you put in there is, and it was another tickable things, is a certain confidence level, right? And once it gets to that point where it says, you've got to feel confident about the ones that you're fixing, because otherwise it will just keep on finding really minor stuff. So it will get to a point where it won't just keep on generating, right? Is that the idea behind it, or?
Yeah, they'll go to loop until it doesn't find anything anymore in the auto mode. And if you look at it, like we literally you created this page. It's awesome. I'm sorry, this is like just a new world for us. Like you created the page and with vibe coding, which is cool. But now what did it do to developers? So bear with me. Like what it does is it makes the developer or the person that's not even a developer that's vibe building apps. Now they're the tester. And they don't know how to test, right? They haven't spent tens of years testing and know all the different types of problems to look for and so on, and how to triage them. So with one click, you're finding actually issues that like a tester would find and suggest back to the developer, and with one click, sending it back to the developer, the virtual agent developing, and it's fixing and updating the site in real time, which is crazy. So we're seeing this. The time to value, I think, is what's even most exciting about this, is that you can keep that vibe loop going. Because what do people do today? Even like you see, like when OpenAI or Cursor people talk about stuff, they build and launch the page, and guess what they do? They start clicking around to see if it's working or not, and like maybe that works. Like, does that look right? No. And then they have to like type in the thing. We're making people right now smarter than those folks, and faster and more efficient, because the AI can just do it. And it has to be. If I can add this other part in, this may be a separate clip for you, John. But is that one thing that people don't realize is that everybody kind of thinks I would say in the valley, but like they think that the AI is just going to get smarter and smarter and it'll write bug-free code. Anyone who's been a tester knows that the highest IQ people actually write the worst bugs, usually the most complex or sophisticated and difficult bugs to find and detect and fix. But the reality is there's a few fundamental information theory things we won't get into here, but guess what you don't want? You don't necessarily want the AI that wrote the slop code that is full of bugs to test itself. Like we don't necessarily shouldn't trust that at first with just, with basic intuition, but it's a reality. You can't have that test itself. So that's cool. But we're seeing all that value just with AI and no humans harmed in it.
No, yeah, absolutely. We're not going to get done by the RSPCA or equivalent for misuse of humans, right? So, I think, so what you just saw as well, just as which wasn't that exciting. So, part of it is I won't replay it, but so what I did at the end is, vibe coding in something like Lovable is great, but you're in essence in a web environment, right? And you're kind of restricted to their environment. Now, most people, most teams, Chris's teams and all the rest of the guys will have always, they'll push that to GitHub, and they'll have some kind of CI/CD process going where they're doing continuous testing. And then they're most likely going to maybe potentially go into that second persona of the technical tester who, maybe lives into their favorite IDEs. And I think, we've seen, I guess, definitely a lot of what you were talking about 2 years ago around vibe testing. That is in Cursor, Windsurf, Anti-Gravity, Cairo, all Visual Studio Code, right? And so what you saw there was actually me pushing it to a repo and then opening Code Spaces, which is the web version of Visual Studio Code, which I need to talk to you about so we can get the extension working in the web version, because you probably saw as I did that demo, it was saying, oh, this extension won't run in purely web mode yet, right? Until end of today, once you finish coding it. Then what I did is I swapped it to preview. So I went from Visual Studio regular version, because I always like the early stuff just because I want to be cool. Like I use Firefox developer because I want to, keep up with the people who are also running everything in dark mode, even though I can't see it anymore and I have to use glasses because I've ruined my irons, right?
We didn't rehearse this. What's Firefox?
I have no idea. I think you built Chrome, and then Firefox and Netscape Navigator, they just imploded, right? From what I can understand. And Opera.
They rebranded Chrome. That's right. I forgot.
Yeah. Everything's Chromium, right? Edge, the whole thing. But whatever. Anyway, so within that browser environment, we then just went into Visual Studio Insiders. So we're using Insiders now. And why am I using Insiders? Well, unfortunately, if you're listening to people on LinkedIn this week, they're probably going to say to you, oh, well, our agents have skills. All our agents have skills, right? Part of it is skills are something that's kind of coming through Visual Studio. It kind of did get released in the last version, but what you might see in front of you is that it's now got this plan skill. So, typically I'll have like a 5-stage, I'm going to call it agentic for a second, getting in front of myself a little bit, but let's just call it agents, where you might have something like priming data sources from context understanding. Bench has just sent a question in. I will answer your question in 1 second. Let me move it over to the accepted area. And part of it is you might have plan, you might have design, and this is why I like Cairo, is because it goes and does the planning, then it does the requirements, then it does the requirements, then design, then it does the implementation, then it does the architecture. Because remember, we sacked all the enterprise architects when we got bored many years ago. So it correlates all that. So what I've now asked it to do, and I've asked in essence, the skill. It's not actually a skill. This is just an agent. I've asked the planning agent to do some testing, right? So if you've noticed between things like Cursor, you're swapping between, I want to call it coding mode and agent mode. And agent mode is giving it that level of autonomy where it can just go off, pull down repos to try and fix its various different problems. Whereas the coding mode is more about talking to an agent in the bottom right-hand corner, which is maybe Claude Opus 4.6 or something like that, right? And so all I've literally said to it at the moment is, look, I want to think about doing some testing. Now, obviously, the goal here is to say, well, actually, I'll do some testing. I'll do some testing with Testers.AI. And maybe a year and a half ago, back in November in 2024, in the coffee place, the first thing we started talking about is MCP, right? Model Context Protocol. And for those people who've been, again, keeping up with the times, that was from Anthropic. They donated that to the AI Agentic Foundation. And that AI Foundation pretty much meant that everyone went, I'm going to use the word GA, but it just means that they moved away from SSE, which was kind of unsecure, to kind of secure MCP. And now everyone's building MCP apps, MCP UIs. They're just kind of going completely crazy with it. But nearly 2 years ago, you built and exposed the MCP in the CLI for testers, right? And so the idea between that and the same way as kind of Playwright CLI is so you can start talking to it and give it some information, some context. So in our particular case, we refer to it as dynamic tests or directive non-deterministic tests, as the way I use it, but I could be completely wrong. So you're giving, in essence, the Testers.AI a kind of a goal or an objective to do. And so what we're doing now is we're kind of going, okay, do the planning. Once you've done all the planning and you know what you want, connect to Testers.AI, and then what you'll see is the agent in the bottom right-hand corner, which is still in agent mode. And in a second, I'm going to turn it from agent mode into testers agent mode. So I've defined an agent in essence. So I've started the MCP. You can see I've actually the first time I've ever started the MCP because local networks told me, do I trust Jason's code? And of course I do. You know, I wouldn't be here if I didn't, right? But once it's done that, it exposes those, what they call, which is, I think is a stupid name, but they call them resources. And so when you go to Testers.AI MCP and you extend it, there's two categories, check and test. You know, one of them really gives you that ability to kind of do dynamic testing, pass in, you know, tests that you've generated, and we'll show that later on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the testers agent, and I'm just going to give it a URL, right? So I'm literally saying, here you go. Here's the URL for this Lovable app that I've got. Knock yourself out, and the MCP will go, okay, I'm going to figure out how to generate 700 plus static tests, which are, I'm hoping you're going to take credit for kind of the stuff you did when you were testing Google Chrome and Bing and all the other kind of tools, the kind of stuff that you know are the stuff that you should be checking. And this is the checking versus testing piece. And then at the moment, which you'll see in a second, is I've actually set the dynamic testing down to 0, right? So I'm not actually doing any dynamic tests, but I will do some dynamic tests later. I just want a bit of spin up. I want to run the 700 static tests, and then I want the report to come back into my chat, because my agent on the right-hand side is saying, I've seen all of these different, you know, the meta tags and the metadata that I'm going to pass through to the tool. And now I want to actually, with that context, once you prime the agent, in essence, I want it to actually use the testing MCP server to actually, now we've planned, and you can see the tasks underneath that the agent's been planning. And if you've been using Cowork for the last couple of weeks, which I'm completely obsessed with, from Claude Cowork, it goes through and does these planning as individual steps, which the agent's creating what it wants to do. Once it's got that, it can pass it across, and off we go. And then the results that come back, which, you know, Jason had put in HTML, but also in the actual subfolder, which is for the keen-eyed people who can see the source code in the left-hand corner, they end up being in a static folder, and which I'll show later on, which actually have a whole stack of JSON files for all the bugs that it's triaged or the issues that it's found. And we can pass those back to that context window, to that agent on the right-hand side, to say, you know, these are the 6 bugs. And then, surprise, surprise, now that it's got the context understanding, it can actually go off and fix the code again, but this at a code level. And when it commits it to the GitHub repository, then I can actually go back into Lovable and actually see the changes happen. So I'm now working not just on a browser, but I'm doing it. I've got developers working on the code base and testing the code base in a distributed manner, but also running these 700 checks. So, you know, anything, Jason, you want to say apart from what version am I running it on? But forget that for a second.
Yeah, no, I guess the key thing here is just that there's the Lovable extension that does like just basic testing for people that are doing kind of basic vibe kind of app development. But then if you want to make it enterprise, there's also versions of the Testers.AI bots that are like super enterprise, integrate with Visual Studio or agents and IDE extensions and all that stuff. So it goes to super robust, deep stuff. So you have like a full enterprise team and you want to do testing of websites in general, or if you're migrating from like a Vibe demo app and may want to make it enterprise kind of level, this is the way to do it. But it's cool that and Jonathan's been an advocate for. He's actually been dragging me into the future on the agentic kind of world, so half this is his thinking. But the idea is, yeah, you make this stuff agents, and they can work anywhere, right? They can work in the browser, they can work in Visual Studio, they can work on your CI/CD backend, on your with a GitHub action. It's a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, and I think that I know I say you were quite upset this week, but you're always kind of upset with me when I have my 6 a.m. calls with you. But about skills, right? And so actually skills are categorized.
Real quick, I'm doing a Claude.
I know you're doing it. I'm just complaining at you because we were like, okay, we need some skills, right? And skills to pay the bills is the way they say it, right? And so part of it is, skills are in essence defined. So if you look at a skill, and this was the Test Scouts question, right? That just came in, was like, how does the different agents, testers, personas share information between themselves? And what you'll have seen, and that the word that I use, the word priming, context is king. We'll say Tariq King for a second. Part of it is it needs to know everything about it. So, we've seen vibe testing in a way take advantage of being able to look at priming the code base. But there's more context than that, right? There's context from the tests that have been designed in the past, the Gherkin scripts that have been written in the past, documentation that can be consumed. So part of it is once it's got better understanding of the application that you're building, it can create better tests in essence, right? And we're going to show that in a minute around dynamic testing. But actually a skill, and you can see here I've just extended the MCP to be a skill for a second, but in a way, it's kind of defining the recipe of what we want it to do differently. And as it evolves, those skills will change because you'll say, well, actually, what I want you to do is I don't really care about the report. I want just the JSON output. And what we'll see later on is that for every single test and every bug it finds, it triages it. And I know this is something when I went out to Sweden to meet the Quality Minds guys originally, we sat there going, there's a multiple different mappings between priority and severity, right? And so your system over time will feed back every time it runs. The LLM as a judge will in essence go, okay, this category is low because you're ranking it down or you're deleting it. And the next time it will realize that those issues are less important than other issues. And so it's continuously understanding, even though we're using, in essence, different platforms, right? We're going from this, where you can see now there's bugs are actually in the window, in the agent window. And now I can literally type, fix the first bug, which is actually a navigation issue, which is actually more severe than I thought, which was the CI/CD link was broken. It didn't actually go further down to talk about enterprise apps because it had kind of just not associated CI/CD at the top with the word that you put enterprise here. So what it realized is one of the links at the top were broken. And what you'll see in a second is it'll fix it. First, it'll, diagnose it. So it'll say, okay, if you had Jura and stuff, you might be at this point putting what feature it is, what epic it is, start tagging it, do a plan, do a design, implement it, retest it, and at the end of it go, okay, that defect or bug can be closed. At the same time, there might be some human in the loop to review. So in this case, when it fixes it, I can open that up and, like my only license I've ever bought of anything really valuable, which was WinDiff, which they actually sent me the floppy disk, the last licensed version of WinDiff, but it'll look side by side. And then it'll show you, okay, do we want to commit this? And this might be the human in the loop, the peer review part of it is making sure that now that it says bug 1 is fixed, is it actually fixed? Or, was it just, as always, AI shouldn't be allowed to test itself, right? So, but what are you finding, Jason? Is this kind of, is that making any sense, or am I just talking nonsense as always?
You're good at making stuff up. No, I'm kidding.
I'm good at making stuff up. Yeah, you're right.
I'm even better. Actually, AI is better than me at it. So I guess to that question too, I think I want to say is that you can also put custom instructions in there. So you can prompt these things. So you can say, I don't care about accessibility, or I really only focus on security right now. And that'll be included in the triage thought. And that'll be shared with all the bots. And all those bots can see the output of the other bots. And like Jonathan was saying, when those things are triaged, if a security agent, testing agent found some issues, but you said, I don't care, don't care, don't care. If like the privacy person finds something that's also related to that, they'll know that you've already not cared about that, and they will also be ignored. And then there's, again, a higher level thing. There's a virtual test manager that decides which testers to run, runs them, and then, like Jonathan was saying, triages the issues. Then again, it comes back to the human. And in most cases right now, it comes back to the human to go, oh, that's a good idea, fix number one, and then to verify that it actually is, double check that it was fixed. So you can keep going. This is new stuff, but
no. Well, you took the exact same things. You saw there at the start. You could give it a bit of direction, right? So again, I call it directive, non-deterministic. You could say, I'm not interested in accessibility, really interested in security and OWASP vulnerabilities. Go and have a look, right? And then you saw the different personas. You could toddle those off. Go, actually, as you can see, Sharon's tested at the moment. Known Sharon for ages, right? And she's a great,
I might have worked with the Sharon. This is the fun thing I have creating virtual.
Yeah, I think you might. A lot of these people have come onto your list. I love the fact that Jason is not you, but what the bugs that you're finding, like you said, you can dump those, so you can actually click on them, and then there's a recycle bin.
It was originally my image, by the way.
But I remember the version. I edited all the versions because you've never featured me in any of these. It feels the bromance feels like
back to the skills to pay the bills. Like no one would.
It is. I just think that you're waiting for the testing singularity, and that will be Jonathon.AI, like when you did registered Arbon.AI, right? When we were on that panel discussion at Star West, it's like it will just be Arbon versus Jonathon.AI in like a celebrity deathmatch kind of final battle of the agentic bots, right? But that's the next live stream. It's not.
You've earned way more tokens than me.
Yeah, I've got too many tokens. But what I think you said, which I think is really interesting, is like where you can see here, it's now generating a whole stack of bugs, right? And it's got a bit of a summary, which is the same thing as that, in essence, that web page. You can export that out. It's a HTML file, dump it, you can look through it, or you can actually get those issues. And now at this point in time, you've got two choices, right? You can find something that's an interesting issue. So you go through them, review them, because the human's still in the loop, right? The test scout guys are still needing to, do it. But I find one here, and I think we found one recently with, the Bing example, which you did before, is I looked at it and was like, this looks interesting. I'm going to take the fix request and I'm going to copy that into something, right? So as I'm going through, you can see the human in the loop. I'm reading through going, oh, that looks interesting. Wait a second, critical CSS render blocking. This sounds good. I'll expand that out. Priority 8, who should I give it to? A front-end person. They're probably going to be using, unfortunately, if they're doing low code, they're probably using the Lovable app. So what I do is I just grab the prompt, click the copy button, jump back into the AI testing hub, back into Lovable, and just paste that same thing in. Said, okay, the performance issue rendering the CSS blocks is causing a deferred critical style, whatever it is. What interesting, because it obviously is a legitimate thing, then their code generator, whether it's Claude Code or it's using Quen or whatever it is they've got on the thing, it says actually analyzing these critical CSS issues, and as you know, because it's Google, need to do the render blocking for the the Google fonts. It's now going to go through, and then at the end it says, okay, I'm now going to rerun it and optimize that loading, and then make the changes. And so even though I'm making the changes on here, when I go back into the Visual Studio landscape, I can actually see that those pre-connect, preload, for all of the tags have been added into the code base that I'm working on actively on the GitHub repo, right? So you're fixing these issues. You're kind of cleaning them off. You're getting them done until, you've run out of things to do. And to your point, you might choose a little bit, a few extra tweaks. So you might change the prioritization, which I know you added in quite recently. So Sharon's got less priority than, Tariq, because obviously everybody wants a Tariq, right? For labeling or whatever it is. So you click on it, you add that prioritization in, and you've got also your favorite deterministic mode, which Stradwick would definitely enjoy. If I toddled that one on and off today, would definitely have a few things to say. But anyway, we've sorted out large context issue, and you can see the two documents that I've now updated that I need to merge back that have actually come from Lovable, because I'm running on the live repo. And now I'm going to run the accessibility, because I might genuinely care about accessibility. And I blame myself for this one, because I came to you and said, European Accessibility Act, end of November, no one's really done anything. Could we create a tool that could do VPAT reports and just generate it all into the file format they need to do?
This is, it's super important now, legally required in the EU, soon in the US. Yeah. But we went super deep on this. So like if you look at like Axe or other tools or like rules, they basically just search the code for bad patterns or something like that, right? Like the DOM or the HTML. But like the cool thing, there's a lot of issues that now you can only do with AI. So it does all the stuff that like Axe would do, plus the stuff that you can do only with AI. So it'll do things like they're required in the standards is to do things like go in, change the font size by 200 times, and then make sure that the font, the page layout isn't dramatically broken. But you can't, like, that's an opinion. That's kind of what an AI can do, is good at. You have to be able to interact with the page. It's not a static analysis kind of rules-based thing. So we can provide a lot more coverage and depth of coverage because we have the AI and working with the rules-based stuff. And then, so it goes through like WCAG, AA, AAA, and gives you a summary report here.
Yeah, and that summary report which you download is in essence the makings of the VPAT stuff, and then you can triage these individual items. So obviously it's kind of said 2 of these just need to be fixed, right? You would probably not pass. So straight away, Testers.AI, you get calling out and said, okay, well, analyze it for me. Tell me why it's important. As you just said, what was the standard? What did it broke? What's the impact? So what will it cost me? Also from a legal perspective, if I get a fine, what will that do? In which countries would I have to?
This is really helping that interrupt. Just was is this is what helps that user. So like, there still need to be humans involved in a lot of accessibility testing, but like it does most of the stuff as automated as possible. But it helps let the person interactively ask AI, like, why is this an issue? How would I fix it? What are the ramifications? And gives all that other context that most accessibility folks don't have, or at least it gives it to them a lot faster.
Exactly. So you can see here, obviously I wouldn't expect this from an accessibility one. If I asked Lavina to do this, she probably wouldn't feel comfortable about doing it. But I've just taken your prompt, which feels very gherkiny to me when I look at it, right? And now it said, oh, wait a second, you've given me this context. This is what it needs to do. And then surprise, surprise, it does the exact same thing. It goes through, looks through the code, identifies violations against the WCAG 1.41. And then the famous WinDiff is it'll tell you where it needs to make changes to make sure it can comply. And so even though this app is the most simple app in the entire world, just the vibe coding tools as they are today, generating mush, as you would put it, straight away you can see now which the font's changed, right? So for the keen eyes of you, that font now is apparently, when I refresh it, is 1.41 compliant. It just looks like a different font to me, right? But it's part of the background, whether or not someone can see it who's got, blue, obviously if you use your phone too late at night, all those kind of side effects, so suddenly, even though they're little tiny changes, and, you'd have to obviously update your brand guidelines, they're actually big in the real world. And so like on the final frontier, the other thing which you launched quite quickly was this checking inside of the browser. And so, we did this at the hackathon in December. Everyone loved it, right? They kind of went, okay, I'm still in my browser. I'm not in an IDE. I'm not having to load anything on my machine. Straight away, I can find, in that case, I think it was 17 bugs. And I can export those out. I can push those to my favorite test management tool or my favorite bug tool, Jura, Atlassian, Inflectra, whatever else it is. But also, as you've done with all of it, you can export that issue. You can go off and actually fix that issue. But, straight away, you've got that standard checking, really quick standard checks that everyone can do straight inside the browser. And then, thankfully now, as you've also added in the recorder, right? Because you can actually generate the tests what tests you should run on this page, right? And again, it's not the most advanced page in the entire world. It's just one page. But actually straight away being able to say, okay, generate me what you think are the top 10 interesting tests, or fix me the top most interesting bugs. And then, yes, they're just saved out into something that's really easy that can kind of straight away say to you, why is it a bug? What's the fix? And again, this is a pretty simple bug, but it's been triaged enough. And then the next thing is when I ask it to, even if you're a manual tester, so I'm hoping Chris logged off before he comes and hunts me, get down. But if I was Chris's team, he could pass this test case generator, put in 5, 10, 50, 100, whatever amount of tests he wants to do. And you could even add in the custom prompts to make your own Chris, or, the test coasts guys, test scouts kind of special source for different types of testers they have and personas, which was the question earlier. But you can then straight away create these tests. Now, you might be all sat there going, well, you can probably see my up here, I've got my WinRunner and my test director box up here. Test director, which was in essence Excel, you could put in a TC01 for a test case, but you might have not got some of these fields, like why is it important? What's the impact of it? What's the probable cause of that going on? How do I fix that? How do I articulate that? So even though it looked surface level, it just looked like it was just a couple of steps, like click on this, do that. It's gone through that process of, well, what happened? What's the impact of actually, if this goes wrong? And then what we're actually seeing, which is, I'm going to throw all over to you in a second, but, is you can auto-generate those tests, but you can also auto-generate those within the IDE. So if you're not just wanting to use the plugin tool, I think this is 4 or 5 years ago when we were both on a live stream, and I pinged you about what's the cure for selenium poisoning, a bit of a hugs joke, and we said carbon tablets, right? Which aren't that exciting. And then we had this idea, well, how could we move people across, whether they're doing it manually, using selenium or something else. And I think people have got quite, from an open source perspective, have started using things like selenium and going through and recording linear flows. What happens if you could get something that would allow you to run, say, a vendor tool or something like that, capture all the steps that it does, what I did in a book with Dot 10 years ago called Manumation, capture every single step, but then also do insertions against those, dynamic assertions, where it's like, well, I understand the cause and effect. If I go to terms and services, I should see a page that has some contextual references to terms and services. But these dynamically generated ones could be two ways. They could be generated like you saw before from the recording tool, or you could be dynamically generated from testers, right? And again, you're seeing the same thing, but now in Dan North, Elizabeth Hendrickson, Goiko's specification by example, kind of Gherkin given when then format. But also, if you really want to, you could put it back into what we've kind of been working hard last year on, which was this open Testing.AI kind of idea of a generic standard, which you move away from, even, I know open source was supposed to cure mercury poisoning, but really all that meant was people were creating, Ruby scripts or whatever they decided to write the Selenium code in. Part of it is that's still a proprietary format. You want to get it into a generic format where you're passing images, OCR data, and everything else into a universal format. So that way it can be consumed by an agent or a skill or whichever the best in class tool can be, so that it's got as much context as possible. So it's not just going click on button, look for DOM element with no context of why is it doing that in the first place, right? So this idea of being able to use, there's always going to be somebody, and I don't know if the Test Scouts guys have gone now, but you can ping me if not, because they won't buy me any beer next time I see them. But there's also people who just want to hit a magic record button, right? So they might want the auto assertion mode on, where it's going, okay, I move to this screen, something loads, okay, cause and effect modeling, here's the results. So people might still want to do that. They might want to just do, I dare use the word exploratory testing, but they might want to go and explore the system, but then have a recorder, which I know has been built into Windows for many years. They're just about to end of life the test recorder tool. But be able to then capture the screens, the context, the window, what was clicked on, what was navigated to. And if they want, they can put that into a headless browser proxy and just run that, run all of those again, 10 of them, 15 of them, if they really wanted to. Or they could turn them into dynamic tests and actually pass them back into a system as reference for testers to actually execute it. So I say that was the most simple 30-minute demo that I've ever done in my entire life. But you probably would say you recorded it, Jonathan, so you don't get any credit whatsoever for that. But do you think we've kind of covered vibe engineering there, or vibe testing, or did we? What was your viewpoint on that?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, I think that I want to make one comment is specifically about the record and playback is they got a bad rap for a while, right? Including I gave it a bad rap. But it's because the stuff's so brittle. Like it just made recording was very brittle and specific. The playback was brittle and would, it demo good, but then it breaks the next day. The the cool thing though is now we not just record all the steps. The AI converts it to the Gherkin style. That records the intent, right? So then the AI, when the AI plays it back, it also can deal with a little bit of changes in here on the selectors and stuff. So you have a lot of robustness on the recording side and the playback side. So it may be doing a comeback here. Like a lot of people are actually more people than I thought would be interested in that than more. Yeah.
I think that's the whole thing. It's not one way, and I'm realizing I've got the hook still on my hat, so I'm going to take it off because it's unnecessary. But there's more than one way to boil an egg or whatever they say, right? Part of it is certain people feel comfortable with certain things, right? The Windrunner tool had a record button, right? And the first day that I actually started working in the 90s with XRunner, my mentor at the time turned around to me and said, if I ever see you press that red button, I'm going to break your fingers, which, in those days you could get away with it because it was the 90s, but you obviously can't do that now because you report them to HR. But what he meant at the time was, I want you to read the GUI repos in as an input, and then I want you to dynamically create object repositories as you are going through. So when press dynamic button, the identifier it's going to look at. You can swap between a hybrid mode of, using some kind of selector or using an image or using some OCR technology. That's not new. It's been around for 30 years. So moving between that hybrid thing is missing the intent. And a record tool that has no intent is like Selenium Builder was 20 years ago, is just creating stuff with no understanding of, well, what am I testing? And so I can understand why a lot of people were upset about automation. And a lot of people would say automation isn't testing, it's checking. You can understand that because there was no intent. It was literally, you can't explain why you were doing that. If you were doing FX or you're doing derivatives, you couldn't explain the logic and the intent that was behind it. And, the FX just changed. What does that mean for, a transaction in Poland or something? Now you have that context, you have that subject matter, context engineering, context understanding. You've also got that, unfortunate level of its ability to reason. And that's why I think moving also too fast and thinking that a non-directed, non-deterministic testing model, i.e. just let it go and test everything it wants, is not the right way. It has to be directed with some kind of intent. And then it needs to also be able to deal with repeating the non-deterministic nature of the way that these models work. So that way you're still able to validate the content, whether it's, in that case, that kind of, okay, if I type in searching for aliens movies, I expect 3 aliens movies to come, but next week they'll probably Hulu will release another spin-off series, and now there's 6. So part of it is it needs to know that by looking up IMDb, or hopefully not Wikipedia.
I think there's a big problem with people before they want to do is you can have a test case that just is verified there's an ad on the page. They want to just the ads show up, right? That's the money. But I guess to answer the question you originally asked though here is also like, what is this? How does it relate to vibe testing and stuff? It's one is if you look at all the actual bugs that are found, and not only do we see bugs found, we saw them get fixed. And all across all different types of bugs, and you're in control of it. and you can just send it back to the AI, or you can put it in a Jira ticket. But you're in control. But really, if you think about what Jonathon did, you play it back without mute him. Just look, he's just clicking around, and guess what? A whole bunch of testing happened, and it's probably before a typical, dev cycle would be, like an agile cycle or something like that. But you're getting automated results, and time to value is like, within half an hour or less, sometimes minutes for a lot of these things. And it may look a little bit chaotic in the sense that we're clicking between different environments, but Jonathon's showing off that these things, they just work in every context, and they can kind of work together. And I really built a thing where, like, it did everything in one thing. You just click one button and it would just do everything. You sit back, go to coffee. But people wanted to have some control. People wanted to click things. People wanted to review what the AI is doing and stop it midstream. And so we kind of factored it out. Some people just want to do accessibility, so there's a separate accessibility extension. So we broke it up into little pieces on purpose, because sometimes people just want to use one part of the elephant, like the leg or the tail or the trunk, and you can do that. But really, Jonathon just did a pretty good test cycle by himself with the browser, and most of it was clicking, not even typing. And Jonathon can't think on the fly, so there was like no creativity involved in it. But it made him think also about, like, oh, there's a CSS rendering thing, performance, and like maybe I got to think about other performance issues. And so then he can go off and spend his time, instead of finding those basic issues, he can go on and use his human intelligence and go on and say, hey, I'm looking at other performance issues, right, related to CSS, or just measure it, look at the network calls, and maybe look at the image sizes, because that's going to slow down the page load. It's a problem I have on my own website. But it gets the human thinking about it. But they're not spending all their time and money doing all the busy work, basic stuff that no one really gets credit for. Let the AI do that. But then the human comes in and goes, okay, we want to fix this. Don't care about this. And that made me think about this other thing. And that's what you're the hero for. But really, we've got testing across, like, privacy, security, networking, performance, usability, like you name it. Like, there's just a ton of coverage that's happened. It's more, and I'll add this, it's more than most of the teams that I've ever worked on in the past did. It would take us weeks. Even then, it would take us weeks. And you get a new build. The other thing that's cool here too, like about Vibe is cool about the Vibe thing is, Vibe testing here is that if you got a new build, right? The cool thing is the new build didn't come tomorrow or 2 days from now. The build came in real time. And what did we do? We had the AI check it again, like to verify and validate it, and then to look to see if there's any other regressions or other issues. And then the human, you could go and say, okay, now I want to dig deeper into usability, or I want to dig deeper into networking or something. So you're in control, but the iteration time is like easily more than 10x sped up. So this is the real value. So Vibe testing isn't just basic level testing, is what I want to say. It's actually a new way to do testing where the person's in charge, but you can make it as automatic as you want. But the iteration time is just going up 10x. It's actually a much faster and more comprehensive version of testing that gets done. And people go, oh, they didn't do this or didn't check for this. Yeah, that's why we still have humans, and we're still all needed. That's why I'm still alive and needed and loved, and people being on LinkedIn. But the crazy thing is now they can focus on the fun stuff that people care about. Nobody goes, wow, Jonathon, you found you need to change that font a little bit. Like, no one gives you
a badge,
a reward or a badge or a raise, let alone a raise for that, right? But now that you go back, hey, I've done all this testing. I've saved the company more than my own salary worth of coverage and added more stuff. But now I can think about, these other weird angles and perspectives on things. And that's where people really appreciate testers. So even for the most experienced tester, Vibe testing really helps, I think, elevate them and help them keep their head above water so they can actually think and actually do the things that they take pride in, which is being clever, finding edge cases, communicating it clearly, putting it in context. I said the word context, didn't I? But that's what they're rewarded for. But now you can finally do it instead of just clicking everything all day as fast as you can and not being fast enough. Thanks to Vibe testing.
I love it. You know, yesterday I was messaging Summer from Tesla, right, and around you know, I'm just getting the next question that's coming through. Let me just put it into area. So, you know, and I was speaking to her about the crowd, right? And I was kind of talking about this. And obviously, you know, we've been having chats with, I'm going to go and see her in Florida in a couple of weeks. And I kind of, I said about the fact that there's this bug bounty kind of view, right? If you take someone like HackerOne or some other kind of, you know, crowd bug bounty reward system, you know, they're going to be finding the value of what those bugs that have been found, right? And so we were looking at the accessibility one, and I know I've not seen, you know, obviously now it's a lot more prevalent, and it's also the potential financial impacts like Domino's got, and a few other people have been burnt with it. There's brand damage. There's, you know, also not being able.
These weren't accessible.
Well, they're just, yeah, they were not accessible by people with disabilities. There's all these challenges now, which
was the box too big, too hot?
Probably too tasty is what they were.
There wasn't a contrast between the pepperonis and the cheese.
Well, I worked, obviously, you know, I worked on the Domino's thing, and, you know, they do the QA with the image recognition of all pizzas. So each pizza comes out, it'll count how many pieces of pepperoni on and stuff like that, and it'll reject it if not.
Does it?
Yeah, it's been there for years, right? So yeah, count it next time you're doing it. But you know, part of it is there's all this, like you said, there's all this busy work, right? And I think part of it is if you're trying to look at real time to value, right? Even to direct your humans in the right direction, is, you know, there is the temptation of, well, I'll just click my normal pizza, you buy with my normal card to my normal address, you know, you go through the same flows, and that's the 90%. I ever never want to use the word happy path, like you never wanted to use the word context. But, you know, part of it is, you know, you go through it and the same ones, the same browsers, their favorite browsers, the favorite resolutions in whatever it is. And, you know, you're just clicking stuff, and you know, the likelihood of finding stuff is low, and the stuff that you might not be comfortable doing, usability, technical, you know, performance, debugging stuff. And that's why there's a lot of that routing. I said it American for you, aluminum. And, you know, routing to the right person, because you've got to go in the organization and say, oh, I'm going to hand this off. I don't know OWASP standards, but I know there's an OWASP vulnerability. You know, we found one with, I think the Keysight website have a jQuery module that's 8 years old, and it's got all these security bugs. But actually, it's not their fault. It's Adobe's fault for providing the entire enterprise platform, right? So part of it is you're looking at the dependency. Oops, we don't say anything like that. But, you know, part of it is these issues are real. But I would never have gone and looked at that jQuery library and gone, oh, wait a second, 1.2.3, that's 6 years old. I didn't realize we're on 2.4.8. You know, I don't know that. I don't think many people do. But the fact that an AI can investigate that and say, there's some issues here, and then actually people go, we need to fix this immediately because this is a Sev1 issue that, you know, potentially we can get cross-site scripting or worse vulnerabilities, you know, that is actually really good value. And I think this is the whole point, is where you had the time to value or before was quite slow. If you were using humans, you can accelerate that and supercharge them. So one tester can keep up at the pace now of the slop, what's coming out of development. I'm sure developers will say something completely different, but I am going to.
It's a DDoS against the developers. So you give them a bunch of bugs they got to fix that, you know. By the way, you find them in production all over the place. Like no one's finding all these bugs. Everything's escaping. But you DDoS the developers, and then guess what the testers can finally do? This gets me excited. I've worked at crowdsourced testing things before, like and just test teams and stuff. But like, give them the freedom to breathe. Like, so it's almost like a buffer, just like, okay, you keep them busy and happy, but I'm going to do the thinking that I take pride in, right? And the reason I hate the word context is because of course you use context. It's like, it should be obvious that you do. I use intelligence when I do work.
And critical thinking. Remember critical thinking.
I was avoiding that word. Yeah. If you have to say it, you're probably not doing it by default.
It was 1 minute left to go. So I thought to myself, if I put critical thinking in, then, you know, at the end of the day, that just covers everything, right? But it is interesting because obviously the test scouts kind of came back with, you know, they think a really interesting subject. You know, 20 years ago, they stopped looking for bugs, but find them because they're passionate about breaking stuff. but they're trying to understand the purpose and the why, right? And I think that's the matrix, that question of the why. Why are we doing this, right? And I think when you start looking at regression and Selenium scripts that are running 20,000 scripts, you could say to them, well, why not 30,000 scripts, or why not 5 scripts? Part of it is the why is a question. I think if your only reason to create tests or run tests or check tests or do checking is to make something green, then you aren't going to find bugs. You're not going to add any value, and you're going to get into this repetitive cycle where you have to do everything quicker, faster, cheaper, and they're just expecting the same amount but at a faster pace, and it becomes unsustainable. And I think the Google was a great example of having this downtime, this capacity to, you can't sprint all the time. You need some thinking time, you need the creativity time, and you need the nurturing, the professional development. And I think now it's it's so fast. All the tools that have been built today are for developers to go faster. But like you said, and kind of what we've been talking about last couple of weeks, is 6 months from now, the most important thing in the entire world is testing. Because if you can generate stuff, then you've got to test it, that it either makes sense to have that in the first place, the why, right? And I think that's why suddenly testers are the gatekeepers of the business agility, because the concept which we just showed, from the idealization to the generation and creation of the thing, the build, is minimal time, minimal touch points, and could be a lot written by agents or agentic. So who's the gatekeepers of why did we decide to make that decision?
The entire life cycle.
The life cycle is just test.
Just prizes billions of dollars of cool experiments. Guess what they can't ship them for?
Yep.
Because they don't trust it. Because the quality sucks. And that's why the AI slop is basically the term of 2026. But yeah, so now that's the problem. And I wouldn't even say that I would ban you from saying gatekeepers, but now we're discussing and arbitrating over individual words and terms. But yeah, guess who the most important people should be now? It's the testers. But they need to be enabled. They need to be fast enough to keep up with the developers. And so this helps them keep up and be fast enough, but still have the time and the mental space to do some interesting thinking and with creativity. But they're the ones going to let the enterprise ship that code and get value. So it should be a great time to be a tester, but not if you're not AI powered. You got to be AI powered to be relevant. But if you can be AI relevant, you can be hyper relevant right now, because developers, you just type into a thing and it generates the code. The hard problem is testing, and the hard problem is quality. So it should be a glorious 2 years for the tester if people step up.
I love the fact that you're giving them 2 years. That's a Whitaker kind of thing, saying it's okay, testing's dead.
Okay, you know why I say 2 years actually, though? There's actually some thinking behind it.
Okay.
Actually, it's not because fundamentally, I'll say this last thing is fundamentally, you can look up information theory like Gödel's incompleteness and Turing's the halting problem. If you look into those things, AI itself, it can obviously generate tons of code, right? Tons of applications and code. But you cannot, by inspection, look at the thing and determine that it's correct. It just cannot, based on fundamental information theory issues. So literally, even if these things become like 300 IQ, 400 IQ, right? They get close to where Jonathon's at in terms of IQ. Then they still need testing, and it has to be done external to that process. And the actual code has to be executed and run to verify that it actually works correctly. It's just because of information theory. It's not like the AI is going to get better and smarter and then you don't need testing anymore. So I give 2 years because we're going to be the longest pole. Dev's going to go away way before testing does. And my only hope, not only hope, but you're our only hope, Luke, or whatever, is that, and I get passionate about this, is that the testers need to stand up, because if the testers aren't going to use these dang tools, guess who is? It's going to be the developers. And guess what? They're not the best testers on the planet. So it's not going to be great, but there's a real opportunity for testers, but they need to pick up these tools and infrastructure and use them to keep up and be relevant. Otherwise, the developers and ops folks are going to do this, because guess what? They don't have anything else to do today. They prompt They doodle around on the internet while it's building, and they come back, and what are they doing? Testing now. If possible, they'd rather send it off to testers. But guess what? If the testers take a week to get back to them, they're not relevant. So please, testers, please, I've been consistent over the last several years. Like, step up, be relevant. Don't fight it. Use it, leverage it. It doesn't do everything. Use your brain. Let it use that tool to give you the space to do the creative things that you take pride in and that you're good at, rather than doing all the busy work. But if you don't, the developers will do this and pick it up, because that's the only thing they have to do. And guess what? They're lazy and they don't want to do it. So they'll have AI do it.
And I think that's the end. That's it was I guess, the moment of truth where 6 months ago, Altman and the CEO of Cursor both sat down and said, what's the future? WTF. And, that WTF was, they both turned around and said testing. And then the CEO of Cursor is now saying it's a 6 month, 12-month run until we feel pretty confident that the end is coming, and I think
they don't understand testing. This is what I love. They don't freaking understand it. They don't know they don't know Gödel's theorem. Call them on somebody in a conference call or something needs to ask them to describe, Gödel's incompleteness or Turing's halting problem, how it impacts testing. They think they can just make these agents smarter and do reinforcement learning and make it smarter and be bug free. They don't get it, which is why we have this special opportunity as testers and people that focus on quality to rise to the occasion, I think, in this glorious moment as humanity tries to automate itself out of existence. And if anyone's going to usher in the end of the world, it's actually going to be a tester. It's not going to be the AI frontier models or the developers.
No, I love it. I had earlier this week, I had a call with Egypt, because I'm going to do an Egypt conference. And we're talking about the pyramids. And it was an example I know we've talked about in the past about the fact that there's this misconception that there was thousands of slaves who were building the pyramids.
This isn't Joe Rogan, man. This is not Joe Rogan.
But they were highly skilled, engineers. And I think that's the thing, is an idiot with a tool is still just an idiot. I think part of it is
now. Are you looking at me right now when you say
I'm not. I was looking over there, but it's kind of. But I think this is the thing, is to echo what you were saying, is this is the time to pick up these tools. And fair enough, we may not be, AI first straight away, but if we can start at least coming around to the idea that there's an opportunity to get AI literate and start utilizing these tools and stay relevant, then 2026, there's no better time. And this is why we're kind of doing this echo to say Testers.AI /download HTML, Dreamweaver, whatever you built it with. Go and download the tool, try it, go onto the Chrome extension store in your Edge browser or whatever other browser you might have, Opera.
You can try them for free. I'm trying to be helpful.
Yeah, and just download it. And you can, everything we've shown you today, you can run for 5-10 tests straight away, right? So you can just get started. There is no reason by, in an hour's time or even tomorrow, Valentine's, right? Take Valentine's, have some you time, and use testers, fall in love with Testers.AI, and it'll be the best Valentine's you've ever had.
I think that's false advertising. I mean, there's a lot of damn AI marketing right now. That's a bit much, man. That's a bit much.
I know what I'm going to do on Valentine's anyway. I'm just going to be using promo code bromance.
Cool.
You put it into the Testers.Love, put code name bromance in there, and you'll have the best Valentine's of your life.
Now that I know you don't know what to do on Valentine's, by the way, I am offline on Valentine's.
Are you joking? Oh, I was hoping this is when we'd get the new builds out for the few things. Okay, well, I think that's a wrap. Good questions. Some really interesting stuff. And yeah, we said we'd probably try and do this every couple of weeks or a weekly geek out, drop it in calendars for people who are trying to get started and trying to help them out, right? So we will try and put something in the calendar.
Cool. Thanks for putting all that together. I love writing Sidecar and just being the color commentator. And
you love, and we love Lovable. So if there's any investors at Lovable, you know, out there, you know, we've got an app, you know, go and download it. You know, it's better than yours.
I don't think that's like a good biz dev messaging, but it's true. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? Yeah, independently tested by 2 people. Okay. All right. Well,
Cool. All
go
right.
test